Dave, I almost need a trumpet or something. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
It's so good to have you, Dave. This is 2 weeks in a row. I feel very privileged to have you with us.
Yeah, glad to be here. If you could get some confetti and stuff too when I show up, it would be really nice. You know, you get some confetti, dancing girls, some
Yeah.
trumpets going on, a little band. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll work on that post-production and see what we can put together for you. So, Dave, how's your week going? Are you getting everything accomplished?
It has been a crazy week. When we look back at it, we had spring break last week, horrible weather. We did end up traveling to see a son that we're trying to adopt, that we're going through the process with. Got a chance to get to meet him for the first time. We've seen pictures, talked to his foster parents and stuff, but we're able to do that. Another son that had a birthday yesterday, so we did some celebrating there. But the weather's just been bad. We've had a lot of rain coming through here, pretty cold, pretty hard to get out and do much.
Well, I'm glad you're with us today talking retirement. Obviously, that's why we're here. But it's nice to have that little getaway, to have that time away. But it's also nice to be able to come on here and help other people that are just trying to figure out how to deal with retirement. Because it seems like more and more the people we end up talking to, Dave, they just said, I just don't have anything set for retirement. I don't know what to do. And we're here to try to help get them a little closer.
Yeah, and this is a good week. We have a lot of classes going on this week. I was looking at the schedule on Monday, and obviously now we're about halfway through it. But 3 4-hour classes, a 2-hour class, just got done with a 1.5-hour reverse mortgage class. Got a number of other classes coming up later in the week, had a bunch on Monday. So yeah, it has been a busy week for us from an education side.
And we want to welcome all of those that are joining us live. Thank you for being here. Again, we encourage you to submit your retirement questions, to come on and ask Dave any question you have regarding retirement. And those on replay, thank you for being here as well. And if you do have questions, you don't get it to us today, you can always go to retirementriskadvisors.com and go to the Contact Us page, and you can submit your questions there. Dave, as you can see, the sun decides to go up and down right where I'm at too. So maybe my weather's changing.
Well, that's good if you're getting some sun. We've got overcast again today. It's supposed to get clear up later in the week. Hopefully I can get out and do some disc golf. Haven't been able to do that for a few days. Like to get out this time of year, try to do it 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, well, definitely I hope you get out there and the weather eases off a little bit so you get some more sun. But Dave, let's get into it. Are you ready to do some more retirement questions today?
Let's do it for question 10,352. What?
Yeah, I think we're at 11,000 now, but we're getting definitely close.
Yeah, I'm sure we are over 11,000 questions at this point, as far as we are into this year.
And so again, we get all of our questions from you watching and from different webinars, from different opportunities where we meet with others, or if they submit them to our website. And we take all of these questions, we put them on the different platforms for you to answer, Dave. And let's jump into my first one here from Darla. And Darla's wondering, if my Social Security is taxed, will it be federal and state income tax?
Darla, this is a great question and something that many people don't really take enough time to think about. It is going to be federally taxed, but depending upon which state you live in, it may not be state taxed, not only because you may be in a state like Nevada or Florida where you don't have an income tax anyway, but many states will exempt Social Security from taxation. In fact, some of them will exempt other forms of retirement income from taxation. So going to be based upon your state. Where I don't know where you live, can't answer that question, but definitely look at your state rules, because maybe a chance there you wouldn't be paying any state tax on these benefits.
And Dave, along with this Social Security question all the time is how do I do Social Security without paying taxes?
The reality is you've got to get the right amount in each of the buckets we talk about. We talk about taxable, tax deferred, and tax free. If we can get our assets allocated into these various buckets appropriately, you can get to a situation where you don't have what's called provisional income, or your provisional income's low enough that it's not going to create taxation on Social Security. But it's going to require some work for most of you if you've got assets. Now, if you only have Social Security, you're not going to pay taxes. You're not going to have provisional income to worry about anyway. But if you've got assets that are creating income, you're going to have to do some planning, some work, sit down with an advisor and really figure out where those assets need to be.
So Dave, in theory, if I'm not paying taxes on my Social Security, is that something to really brag about?
Yeah, I don't know that you brag about it, but I'll tell you it's a positive thing. I mean, when you look at see our 5 to 7 years faster is how quick your assets can run out if you've got to pay tax on your Social Security. Well, the problem is we're living longer. So it's not like, hey, we're going to pass away 5 to 7 years faster because we're paying tax on our Social Security. No, because of life expectancy and longevity, we may live 2 or 3 years longer by the time we get to that point. And yet Social Security is running out sooner, and our other asset, not Social Security, it's going to continue on, but our other assets are running out sooner, creates this big gap where all of a sudden, as we get further into our retirement, may not look at all like our retirement did during those initial years.
Well, Dave, let's jump to my next question. This one I'm really excited to talk to you about. This one's from Joe. And Joe is saying, what debt is good debt for my client's retirement?
Well, personal feeling, Joe, is no debt's good debt. When you look at it, and again, I know I'm different than many of you out there, and I'm not saying that you have to agree with what I'm saying here. But as I look across the thousands of people that I've worked with throughout my career, the happiest people I've ever found are those who have their debts paid off. Those who are leveraged, sooner or later, there becomes a problem. Either we have a situation where we've got markets that collapse and all of a sudden it's becoming an issue, or maybe a business, they've got some business loans are collapsing, the real estate market's collapsing. You just have issues if you have debt. So from my side of it, I don't want any debt now. I don't want any debt in retirement. I don't think any debt's good when you look at the overall long-term side of sheer happiness. Now, if you say, look, from a leveraged financial standpoint, I can borrow money right now in a house at 3% or wherever that might be right now, and I can invest it in the market that's doing 20%. Yeah, from a financial standpoint, you may say, well, that's good debt. But in my opinion, it's more about happiness than money oftentimes, and the few opportunities we may have for growth when we start looking towards our retirement.
And Dave, I did a little research on this too, just trying to find out, because again, as some people look at good debt versus bad debt, they look at some of the things and say something like your home, they say is good debt versus credit card, which is bad debt. And so I wanted to ask a few of these to you and just kind of give me your feelings. Because again, as we're talking, we're just trying to make sure we're out of debt. But a lot of times we have to look at some of these options by saying, okay, that's a bad investment, or that's bad debt or good debt. And so some of the ones I wanted to ask you, Dave, is what about, how about education? Let's talk about student loans.
Yeah, so the problem is for many retirees, they've got their kids and their grandkids' student loan debt. It's not even their student loan debt. Hopefully, by the time you get to your 60s or 70s, yours is long paid off. But if it isn't, and it allowed you to create money, I mean, again, when we look at it, to me, there's a difference in education debt. If you're going to local college, community college, something that's not going to be outrageously expensive, but still provide you with an opportunity to make income, versus people that go to Harvard and then become a school teacher. Well, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to spend all that money to go to Harvard so you could be a school teacher and make the same amount that the guy that went to the community college went to. So in my opinion, I'm not against necessarily education debt if that's the only way you can get educated, because it is an opportunity to provide substantially more money, but you've got to put it in comparison. What's my income outlay potentially going to be versus the amount that I'm going to have to spend here from a debt side?
Dave, how about a home equity loan or a line of credit?
So when we look at these from a general financial side, as we look at it, they're low interest rate. And that's why people say, hey, they're a good debt. You've got your home security. You're able to many times take that money and invest it elsewhere, where you can get a higher rate of return. But again, my problem is here, you're locking up an asset that you need to have. We all need to have a place to live. And we saw back in 2008, when everything collapsed, people had these mortgages on their homes. The value goes down so far, and now all of a sudden there's two things. Number one, there's a side of saying, hey, if I need to get out of it, now I really can't. But there's another side of emotion that many people who could have stayed in their home just said, look, I can't sit here and continue to pay all this mortgage debt when I'm seeing everybody around me not have to deal with it. So I'm just going to leave the home and move somewhere else. So again, it just takes away some freedoms, in my opinion, that you can have if you don't have the debt to worry about.
So Dave, that 80-inch ULED TV is probably not good debt then?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not in my opinion. Yeah, not in my opinion. Not even good if you look at it if you don't have savings. I mean, if you're taking, and many people took their economic stimulus payments and ended up buying a lot of things that they didn't really need. And yet here they said again, going, well, and I saw the other day, CR, there are groups out there that are promoting we should take more. I mean, this is what has helped cause a lot of the inflation we're dealing with now. This is why families are struggling. And again, if you're out there and you got $3,000 as a family, or even $5,000, guess what? I know business owners that got millions of dollars didn't even need it. They just said, look, it's here. I don't need a penny of this. And again, you didn't get helped. You're paying for it now through higher inflation, higher costs, going to have interest rates go up because of everything that's happened. So it's going to be harder for you to get a loan. We've just got to start taking some financial responsibility here.
Yeah, a lot of times, Dave, as I was looking through this, it was saying if you can't pay cash for something, it's bad. But what you're saying is we need to make sure we have a savings before we even start diving into all of these other aspects.
Yeah, and it's like credit card. If you look at it, I don't. I've got great credit. I've not had loans for years. I mean, maybe I'll put one on for a short period of time because of transition into housing or something like that. And I haven't sold a previous home yet. Maybe do something like that, but I haven't had debt forever. So I've got great credit. Well, even on my end, a lot of these credit cards, I'm seeing 20+% interest. Well, if you got bad credit, I've got to assume it's even higher than that. So yeah, you look at credit cards, you pay them off every month. Great thing. Hey, you know what? Could be thousands of dollars of extra benefits that you're going to get because of the points. But if you're going to get stuck having to pay the interest on there, there's no investment out there that's going to keep up with 24 to 30% interest consistently year after year after year that you're going to have on those credit cards.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I just want to remind those that are here with us live, if you do have questions, go ahead and get those submitted, and we'll take a break in between our other questions and get a question thrown to Dave that you submit. All right, Dave, let's get to my next one here. What is your number one tip for retirement budgeting? Do you have a number one tip?
I don't know that I have a number one tip. I would say probably the biggest thing is educate yourself on what you need to do to put it all together, to figure out what's going to be your best option for you. Because again, budgeting can mean different things. It can be cutting spending, saying, look, we want to stay within a budget. It can mean getting education so you can earn more. It may mean that, again, we structure things long-term versus the short-term that we have. So I would come back and say, number one's got to be education on my end to figure out what it is you need to do for yourself. Because my budget's going to be different than yours, CR. We talk about this sometimes. Your kids now at the point, I guess you've still got one in the home that's getting ready to go to college. But, my side, I've got 7 kids in the process of getting an 8th child. Well, there's a lot of additional expenses that I'm going to have that you typically may not have on your end.
And Dave, I like when you talk about, if you're talking maybe say list your expected spending, because that's something we do. But if I look at Donald and Rosie, if they're in their 70s and they're asking for your number one tip for retirement budgeting, I feel like, I don't want to say that's too late, but I feel like that's a hard thing to kind of come up with it in the 70s.
Yeah, if you get to that point, really, it's all going to be about cutting costs. Now, we talked to Kevin, the Financial Panther, on our podcast. That's coming up here soon. He's an individual who does side hustles. And in that podcast, talked about things that retirees can do to try to generate income on a part-time basis. And one of the best ones he had, really makes a lot of sense, especially for retirees, is Rover, which is dog watching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know what you get. I got to assume $30, $40 a day. I know that's what I'm paying for various services in my area. You're getting $30, $40 a day to watch somebody's dog, where you may be able to watch 2 or 3 of these, may be a great opportunity. But you're right, CR, once you get to that point, one of the best ways we really improve our finances is to increase our revenue. It's not to cut our spending. Now, many people have done extremely well living off tight budgets, cutting their spending. But if you can make an extra $10,000 a year, you can make an extra $15,000 a year, that goes a long ways to really helping us figure out what we should do from a budget standpoint.
Yeah, Dave, when I was researching too, some of the things that you brought up is exactly, it's cut spending and fix your budget. And but what you're saying, there's a lot of other opportunities, because that's kind of the norm out there, is to do the cut and the budgets.
Yeah, that's what everyone wants to promote is, hey, we get ourselves to, we've got to live, and Dave Ramsey does this, live like nobody else does for 20 years. So you can live like nobody else does for the next 20 years, or whatever it is that he promotes. So basically saying, look, we got to cut down to nothing. So hopefully in the future we can have a better life. And I don't subscribe to that. Now, again, I'm not saying that people should just go out there and recklessly spend, but I think you can have a good life without spending a ton of money and be able to save enough if you get the right education, have the right revenue, to where then you can have a good life in the future as well. That it's not, hey, I got to sacrifice 20 years so I can have a happy 20 or 30 years later on. Because the reality of it is, too, CR, a lot of times people end up sacrificing during those early years when we're in good health. We can do a lot of things. And then you get to a point where you're saying, oh, I finally got the money to do something. Well, now all of a sudden the health's not allowing you to do the things you'd hoped you could have done and would have been much easier to do when you were younger.
Dave, my very favorite picture of that is the couple that saves and saves, and then it shows them in Italy, and they're on the water, and they're being toured around, and both of them are asleep.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen that picture, but I can see that. I mean, even at this age, I'm 50 and pretty active because of the kids and everything that happens. But again, I'm not going to go parasailing at this age. No, I don't know that I would have done it at 20 or 30, but there are things definitely I would have done and really enjoyed at 20 and 30 that I'm not going to do now. Now, not everyone's not that way. We've got people that are, in their 80s still wanting to skydive and do all those things. But for most of us, again, we've just got to look at the long-term picture. We've got to figure out what's going to work for us now, figure out the best way to get money. Kevin, the Financial Panther, talked about how he does all these side hustles and uses that as his savings. It's like, look, you know what? If I'm going to go take my kid to school, I'll go out there with my e-bike and do a delivery in the process. I got paid to take my kid to school, and when I go pick him up or on my way back, I'm going to do another delivery and make a little bit of money. I mean, these are the things that can really help change our lives if we'll just be creative and innovative and realize all of us do have some extra time and day that we could really spend focusing on these things.
David, the Atlanta Track Club here, there was a lady that was in her 90s that finished a 5K. So, I mean, there definitely is people out there who are still after certain things.
So my question is, did you beat her?
I didn't run that one, but I sure hope I would have.
Okay. Well, I had one of those. When I was younger, I used to run a fair amount. I did very well. I think my best time in a 10K was 31 minutes, which is a great time, and was doing very well. Well, then I hadn't run for probably 15 years, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go do this again. Well, you don't stop for 15 years and go back. I'm sure I weighed more than I did at the time. My lungs definitely weren't built up. So I just take off out of the gate, burn my lungs out, and then sit there and watch the rest of the race as these 60 and 70-year-olds pass me up as I'm walking half the time just trying to survive.
Yeah, that's definitely how I feel when I ran my last 5K. I had a bunch of little kids and old people pass me. So I'm definitely working on trying to stay consistent. So I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, I do have a 90-year-old question here from Jamie that my 56-year-old client thinks she may live to see 90. How do we plan for this?
It's interesting the way this is worded from Jamie. When you look at it, she's probably got a lot of 56-year-old clients who are going to live to age 90. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, many times we underestimate that life expectancy and think, oh, everybody's going to pass away in their 70s or 80s. Not what's happening. I mean, we've got a 25% chance that we can make it, if we make it 65, that we can make it till age 90. But what you've got to do is obviously have better planning. When we look at a retirement that you're going to have, that depending on when you finally leave the workforce, whether it's at 65, 67, 70, I mean, we're talking 20 plus years there that you're going to have to prepare for. That's going to mean that you've got to have more money than you might think you need to be able to get through there. And you've got to also plan for things like inflation, stock market crashes, those type of things.
Dave, I was looking at a Charles Schwab insight, and it said that if current trends hold, half of babies born in wealthy countries today will reach 100 years old.
Yeah, and not surprising. I hadn't seen those statistics, but not surprising. And the sad thing is, CR, doesn't mean that we're living healthier. Now, some people have that benefit. They are having good lives, but many people are end up situations where they're still alive, but don't have a lot of control of what's going on. I was looking at some statistics this morning on long-term care. Average long-term care stay for a male is 2.2 years. Average long-term care stay for a female is 3.7. But the statistics I looked at was what was the maximum time that insurance companies had to pay out on these. You had people that were in there 16 years. I know, it was over $2 million, like $2.5 million. They didn't know who to feel sorry for. Yeah. The insurance company that had to cover $2.5 million of the guy that got stuck for 16 years in a nursing home because he couldn't pass away, just living there, not being able to move his life forward. So yeah, unfortunately, we've got these situations and we've got to be able to prepare for them. And unfortunately, we see it in my evolving retirement law class where we talk about where we went from employer provided retirement to employee, and we're not doing a good job preparing for it, unfortunately, CR.
So Dave, do you have a tip on preparing for the longevity risk?
Yeah, the biggest thing is you got to figure out how to start saving money. You've got to make sure you get enough set aside. Now, once you get it set aside, obviously you've got to protect it. Tom Hagman in one of our webinars talks about this as well. He's like, look, I said in my late 60s, early 70s, I've got millions of dollars I can retire off of. The stupidest thing I can do is lose that money. So I'm no longer retired. I got there. And this is something people got to realize right now. Many people, because of what the market's done, have gotten themselves in a good financial position and may be in a point they can retire. But if the market drops 40%, as many people think it's going to at some point here, can they still be in retirement? You've got to make sure you're protecting those assets, getting into products that are principal protected to get you where you need to be.
Well, Dave, let's jump over to my next question from Lucas. Lucas is 64. I would like to keep my CPA status active after retirement. What could I do?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm going to be of much help here, Lucas, as you look at it. The reality of it is you're just going to have to continue on with CPE courses and continue to pay fees. I mean, that's really what's it's going to require. Most places or most states are going to allow you to keep that active as long as you're doing those two things. I don't know that there are any states out there that require you to have any work experience once you've got the license and have it there. I know there are options to make your license inactive, meaning that you don't have to go back and take all the tests again or do any of that if you end up coming back into work. But with that, I think you do have to continue on through CPE, but it will reduce some of those fees. But again, this is something you're going to have to decide for yourself. And yeah, 64, depending on the amount of money that you have available, may not be such a bad idea. In theory, if you've got a good mind, you may be able to work into your 70s. If something happens, be able to get back into accounting and work into your 70s without any issues.
Dave, if somebody like Lucas is saying, yeah, I want to be able to keep that status active, in your mind, what are the reasonings behind trying to keep that active besides just for the fact that maybe I might have to go back to work one day?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just it took so much to get. None of us want to, if we have these situations where we spend so much time obtaining something, very hard for us to give things up. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story about this with my own father. When I look back, so my dad was a junk collector, and it obviously takes time to collect junk. That's not something that just happens overnight. If you got a big pile of junk in your backyard, somebody spent time and money to do that. It drove me crazy. So as a teenager, one morning I went out and I loaded a trailer we had with all this junk, or a portion of it. There was so much, I wasn't taking it all out in one trailer load, but there was a bunch in an area that I wanted cleaned out. And so I threw it on the trailer and took it away. My dad slept in on Saturdays because he'd stay up watching TV late at nights. And so he'd sleep on Saturday morning. So he was asleep. Well, somewhere during the day, my mom, my brothers and sisters, somebody told my dad what I had done. And he came in frustrated and mad and saying, "What in the world did you do?" And I basically came back and said, "Dad, you tell me one thing that was in that pile, I'll bring it all back. But if you can't, it's gone." Guess what, CR? He couldn't tell me one thing that I'd taken in a whole trailer load of stuff. And I think when we look at these CPA licenses, why do I tell that? So when we look at these CPA licenses, we get attached to things. Here my dad was getting attached to junk that he didn't even know what was. He just knows they'd spend a lot of time bringing it back to the house. Well, CPA license can be that same way. And when I talk to professionals, I often see that that's the bigger concern, is saying, look, it took me a long time to get it. I never want to have to go through that again. So I'm just going to keep it, even though I may not use it for a decade.
And Dave, I love that story because a lot of times in life, it's just, that's what we're spending our money on right now. We're spending our money on stuff, and we're not really bringing value. And what you're saying is in a fancy way is saying, there is an opportunity for us to put money in lots of better options.
And Amazon's made it worse, CR. I mean, when you look at it, right, I don't know what it is around your house. I mean, it's so easy. We have boxes here all the time. We've talked about it, maybe even on this presentation here where we're doing this live event. But part of it's because a lot of my disabled daughter stuff comes through. But again, my wife can get up at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, start going on Amazon, click, 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 and all of a sudden you got 10 items come to your house. So it's definitely something we've got to be aware of. I think if we were to go across the country, most of us have a bundle of stuff that we paid a lot of money for that we really didn't need to pay that money for.
And Dave, this makes it scary because every day is a Saturday. When we're in retirement, we talk about every day is a Saturday, but when we're not in retirement and we can just order, it just becomes Saturdays all every day.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's something that we've got to really look at. I mean, one of the other things, Tony Robbins wrote a book talking about money. He's written a number of books, obviously, but one of them was talking about, really, he got into the details of, how do you live like even a billionaire maybe and not be a billionaire? And really what the gist of the book is, hey, let's stop buying assets, just go rent things. And you don't need to buy a $500,000 beach home that you're going to use once a year. Go rent the thing for $1,000 or $2. That's what it's going to cost you for maintenance and repairs and everything anyway. But I think we can look at even smaller things. When we look at this, we can look at things like, if you're doing something in your house and don't want to spend $150 for a ladder, but know you're only going to need it once in a while, maybe you go rent that from Home Depot, or maybe you've got to have a saw that you're going to do some woodwork just once in one time and not going to need to use it again. I know for us, we needed to paint some of our house. We had to go rent some scaffolding for a period of time so we could do the painting. Well, it's much cheaper to go rent it for the day than it would have been to buy it and then figure out how we're going to store all that stuff.
That definitely makes sense. Well, Dave, let's get into another topic that I know you love to talk about, but that's real estate. Is real estate a worthwhile investment for retirement? This is coming from Macy.
Macy, a very loaded question. I'm not going to tell you that it's not, but I'm not going to tell you that it is. I mean, when we look at it, it really comes down to what you're trying to accomplish. Now, I will tell you some of the problems with real estate that we have when we get into retirement is, one, most people keep it in their taxable bucket. So it means you'll pay tax on those benefits for the rest of your life, or those earnings, as well as potentially have provisional income. Bigger issue that I'm seeing, not that that's not bad enough. I mean, that's a big problem, but the one that I hear more about, especially right now where taxes are at the levels they are, is people get to a point they just can't keep up with it. I can't tell you how many people got in their 70s and 80s. And in fact, I was just talking to one of my clients that's been a client for 20 years just this last week. And he said that he's like, I'm selling my properties. I'm just done. Even though I've got management companies, I'm just done having to worry, deal with this, figure out how I'm going to handle rents, those type of things. So I think a lot of it comes down to our emotion thoughts during retirement, our mental capacity, and definitely things we've got to take into consideration. If you can handle all that, hey, real estate's been a great investment for many people for decades.
Dave, I think we've talked about this many times, but a lot of people just say, they want to have a lot of property and want to be able to take care of that. But I don't know about you and I, but taking care of rental properties in retirement does not sound like a fun job at all.
No, there's something in our minds that thinks we have to own stuff. Again, going back to our conversation before, we think we have to own that rental property. We have these conversations down at the Waffle House or wherever we're at, the coffee shop, and we have these conversations, and we want to tell people that we own all these things. That makes us look important, but reality, when you look at it, it's just not necessarily what people need to be. People that just take their money and invest it, especially if they don't understand what they're doing, far better off to just put it into the market, get some good diversification, and have a lot more money long-term than other things that you could do out there.
Well, Dave, I think we have time for one more question. Let me see if I can get Joanna's question up. Can I still carry health insurance through my job when I take Medicare at 65?
Yes, you can, but you may or may not want to. One of the things you've got to understand is once you reach age 65, depending on the medical insurance you have from your company, it's going to interact differently than it did up until age 65, potentially. Meaning if you're a small employer, you're with a small employer, you've got coverage. Hey, it may have done a great job for you and your family leading up to age 65. Once you get age 65, if you don't have Medicare, then you're in a situation where Medicare would be the primary insured, and it's going to create issues if you don't have it. So yes, you can keep it, but you need to make sure you do a couple of things. Number one, go back to your medical insurance company and say, hey, how do you interact with Medicare? And then number two, really look at Medicare and see what benefits are out there that it may provide to see how you're going to interact those two programs together.
Dave, what do you see as the biggest mistake when you're looking at this health insurance and Medicare as people are trying to combine these together?
It's the belief that because something worked before, it's going to continue to work the same way. And that's just not the case. Again, it's kind of hard to believe that, hey, just because I hit 65, it's going to change. It's like driving down the road. If you're in a state that's got this outrageous speed limit, you're thinking, oh, it's great. I can drive 80 miles an hour on the freeway. I know Utah has some really high speed limit areas. And you're thinking, oh, this is wonderful. Well, if you just don't pay attention, you hit the California border and all of a sudden it's 55 in areas, you got problems. Well, it was the line that created that. That's where the line was happening. Same thing with these insurance companies and Medicare. Worked very well during our working years, hit 65. Hey, it's a different game. And people don't realize that, so they don't do the research to figure out what they need to do to make sure they get signed up for Medicare correctly.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you for jumping on today and answering all these questions. And I apologize about my lighting. I feel like somebody's out there with a dial just turning it up and down over and over as I see the sun changing this. But
I thought I saw your son's shadow there. I don't know if he was on the roof there.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here watching this the lights get light and dark. But Dave, I just want to thank you for being with us today and answering all these questions in retirement. And I think it's an important topic we continue to discuss because I feel that a lot of times we just get very complacent or we get frustrated and we don't know what to do. And so a lot of times we sit and wait until a perfect opportunity comes.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I will tell you, you're right. Yeah, there's no perfect opportunity. There's no, once in a while we'll hit perfect situations that work. In fact, when I was talking to Scott from CPA Academy the other day, he said, look, I hit a perfect spot. I was able to build my company because of the timing. But the reality of it is most things in retirement planning, we just got to move forward with where we are right now. Take what we know, take what information we have, educate ourselves to the best we possibly can, and then be willing to take action, make decisions that over time, most of them will prove out to work very well for us.
And if you are looking for any of the webinars or podcasts that we discussed today, you can find those at retirementriskadvisors.com. There's CPE webinars at the top, or you can go under the resources and click on the podcast. Dave, we have new podcasts every Friday. We've got this show that releases 11 a.m. every Wednesday Central Time, so you can join us here. Or Dave, you have so many webinars, and you have a lot of new webinars coming out very, very soon.
We have so much content coming out. Very excited about it when we look to the next few months and what we're doing. But you're right. We're here to continue to educate. We realize that as people learn more, this is one of the great things about what we do. The more people learn, the more they realize they don't know, and the more information they want to have. So what we continually try to do is to take our general webinars that we do a good job of exposing risk. We do a good job of exposing issues that people are going to have during retirement, and then drilling deeper to say, okay, how do we better understand this topic? How do we get to a point that we can better implement these things into our own retirement?
And so again, thank you for all those who are with us live and those on replay. We appreciate you also tuning in and watching this. And if you do have questions, again, retirementriskadvisors.com, on the contact us page, you can go ahead and submit your questions and get them on one of our future shows. Well, Dave, thank you for being here with us this week. And I hope we see you next week as well.
Looking forward to it.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.